Hello and welcome to the Agri-Food Pioneers. We're here to give a voice to the companies in the agriculture and food industries making a real difference to the environment. And today I'm joined by Joe Wookey, who runs an organic farm in Wiltshire, offering creative workshops, accommodation and gatherings. Hi, Joe. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
So there's a lot going on at Rushall Organics. So can you just give us a brief overview and talk about your position there and your responsibilities?
Yeah, so we are an organic farm right in the middle of Wiltshire. It's a family farm. It's been in the family since the 1920s. We've been organic since 1970. And in recent years, we've ventured into some diversification enterprises on the farm and within the business to sort of explore other avenues that are available to us. So those things include a wedding and events barn, when we do many other different types of events as well up there, which was launched in 2017. So we've had to ride the very uncomfortable wave of COVID with that, but we're at the other side now. So that alongside the farm, there's quite a bit going on here.
Yeah, sounds it. So let's break this down. And first, let's focus on the traditional farming practices that happen at Rushall. What is it, arable or?
Yeah, so our farm, it is our business is arable farming. As I say, we're organic, so we're not using any synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, anything like that. It's all completely sort of a closed system is what I like to call it. So to try and put it in a nutshell for you, we have a 6-year rotation within our arable system on the farm. So each field will have 6 different things growing on it on each year. Over a 6-year period. So for example, being arable farmers, we'd grow 3 years of wheat, then barley, then oats in the first 3 years. The following 3 years would then plant in a grass and clover lay crop to fix atmospheric nitrogen. That also gives us the ability to let out that grassland to a local neighbour, a shepherd. So whilst our business is arable, the farm itself is a mixed farming system. And as I say, we're not spreading any muck or anything like that. So it's very much as a sort of closed system as much as possible. The only nutrition that's leaving the farm is in the form of the sort of the berry of the grain and then the growth of the sheep. Everything else is kept within the soil, which is obviously the most important thing to look after in our system.
That's amazing. Wow. An enclosed system. I love that. So what was the decision-making process like when you decided to go organic?
So sadly, my grandfather passed away a couple of years ago, but conversations with him and books that he had actually written in the 60s, there was a lot of agrochemicals coming onto the market that weren't very well regulated, and they would tick all the boxes in terms of controlling weeds and pests and making crops grow better, but there were lots of knock-on effects. He was big into his sort of local environment, his bird watching, his trees, all this kind of stuff. And it was around the time that DDT was used in I think it was elm trees in the States. And they had discovered that the knock-on effect on the food chain was that it was killing lots of robins out there. So he was reading about that. There's a couple of other books at the time, and in our instance here, we had a lot of grey partridge, which are one of the 5 rare farmland birds in the UK, and we had them in abundance. And then as soon as he started using lots of these chemicals in the 60s, the partridge population plummeted because there simply wasn't the food or the environment for them to thrive in. So he decided in 1970, right, we're going to stop. And so, yeah, it kind of went from there. And yeah, I believe he was one of the sort of pioneers of organic farming in the country, was sort of part of the early movement. And, since obviously it's grown quite a bit now.
Fantastic. And did the partridges return?
They do, yeah. Yeah, we've got plenty of them around. So not as many as they did back then, but we do have lots of great partridge around, as well as tons of other different types of bird life. So we've got all of the rare farmland bird species here. So the lesser spotted woodpecker, the yellow hammer, lapwing, stone curlew, and grey partridge, as well as many other songbirds, corn bunting, linnets. Yeah, I could go on, sorry.
That's all right. Something of a twitcher.
Trying to be. I'm learning, but yeah.
Yeah. Tough gig. And I take it you're pretty convinced that the reason you've got such a varied selection of wild birds is because of you're an organic farm and you're not you're looking after their environment.
Yes. I mean, the point that I was trying to make with organics versus non-organics isn't necessarily about, it's certainly not in arable crops. I don't think the sort of direct health implications of it, or it, being better for human beings necessarily. It's much more to do with what's happening on the ground in the growth of those crops and those animals. And exactly as you say, particularly in the context of climate change around biodiversity being such an important one. Our biodiversity is huge here, and that is simply because we're organic farmers. There's nothing that I'm doing here that is particularly prescriptive to try and protect any of these birds or these insects or these rare arable plants that we have. They simply exist just because of the way that we farm. And I think that's the best advert for doing it the way that we do, is that a natural byproduct of farming organically is that you automatically, tick the boxes and fulfill the criteria of biodiversity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just you don't even have to think about it as much. Just because you're doing the right things, it just the result is just automatic.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I'm trying to grow crops. I'm not trying to grow weeds. I'm not trying to have all these birds on the farm. In an ideal situation, the weeds wouldn't be there, but because we're organic, because we don't spray them off, they are there, and it supports a whole wide network of food chains that support all of that. So yeah.
You make it sound so simple. Well, I mean, I guess the counter argument to that is scale and volume and an increasing population and feeding the planet, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have a counter argument to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one that often gets thrown at me when I'm talking with non-organic farming neighbours, and they say, yeah, well, you can't feed the world, and the population is going to be, 9 billion by 2050 or whatever it might be. There's been some research done by the Organic Research Centre, and actually that information is in the public domain. It was probably released about 5 or 6 years ago. There's enough calories produced now to feed 10 billion people. The issue, really? Yeah, absolutely. The issue is wastage, global wastage. It's also diet. I think, without wanting to use the word Western diet, I think a lot of nations around the world are starting to adopt a more Western diet, which means more dairy, more red meat. And that's nothing against dairy and red meat. I'm just suggesting that perhaps there are scales to how much consumption there should be, and therefore the sort of knock-on effect it has on the production methods of those. Again, going back to the climate change thing, there's been so much Netflix documentaries made on this kind of stuff, with particularly around cattle. Well, that exists simply because of the demand for red meat around the world. If that was changed, we went to a more vegetable-based diet or grain-based diet, then I think, yeah, absolutely, there's enough calories now to feed enough people. So I don't believe that argument. Obviously, there's logistics to take into account as well, of getting that food to places that that need it, that perhaps don't have easy access, but they're not insurmountable, in my opinion.
That I agree, and I think that's a great opinion. I guess it's just I love this. That is the thing I love most about hosting this YouTube channel, because you just hear lots of arguments and counter arguments, and I'm learning a lot. So I really appreciate you being a guest, Joe. It's fascinating.
It's a pleasure.
All right. So we've talked about the traditional farming practices, the organic way you run your farm, which sounds like you're doing a hell of a job there. Let's talk about the diversity in terms of what have you changed. I know you've converted a barn and you're running workshops. Can you talk us through a little bit about that, the decisions to do it? Success, and any kind of detail about, I know you've got some interesting energy ways to source energy for the barn.
Yeah, so Chalk Barn, as it's known, is located about a mile away from the nearest main road on the farm. It's completely off grid. The reason we went into doing it is because the system, the way it is and was within the EU, with regards to subsidy payments for farmers, were quite substantial. simply put, to try and undercut the real cost of producing food, to essentially try and keep food cheap on the shelves for customers. Well, that's gone through a massive upheaval over the last few years, and it just through lack of communication from government, etc., has made times a little bit uncertain for most farmers around the country. So it just felt to us as though diversification, given the sort of place that we are in, which is quite a pretty spot, that we should be doing more with that. There was a barn there that hadn't been used in about 30 years. It was sort of asbestos roof and breezer block and rusty old steelwork. We managed to get planning, and then October 2017 opened the barn. And yeah, it's been great. It's been great fun. It's been a big learning curve. It's not something we'd done before. So yeah, we do all sorts up there. Weddings, parties, all sorts, but as you say, lots of workshops and seminars and corporate stuff as well. So that really was based around a business decision to support the farm and everything that we do, and to diversify, where our kind of income comes from.
That sounds great. Tell me about being off grid. Is it all solar, or is it?
Yeah, so obviously that was a big challenge for us. We were miles away from any sort of connectivity with regards to electricity or heat. We have a big solar array out there. It's about 24 kilowatt array, kVA array, which feeds into a battery. The battery that we had when we first launched it was one of the top spec ones at the time. It was a 10 kilowatt battery back in 2017, and that felt like the right thing to do. What we found since is that 10 kilowatts was nowhere near enough for the usage that we needed up there. So whilst we were producing some good energy up there, we weren't storing it in the size and for long enough for what we needed to do. So we were having things backup generator for when the battery did drop down, and then that went kaput. We've in the last year had to replace the battery from 10 kilowatt to now 150 kilowatt.
Oh wow!
So now we are on a much more reliable system in terms of energy that we're producing being stored properly, and therefore its usage it's a much more efficient way of using what we're producing. So that's from the electricity point of view, and it works really well. We're producing enough for all the demands up there. The water supply, it's from the farm water. So all the water for drinking water, washing up, all that kind of stuff, it's all from our borehole on the farm. And then the heating up there is done with a biomass boiler, so wood pellet, which does underfloor heating and all the hot water as well. So, I won't lie, it's come with its issues as I've described, but it kind of fits in with our ethos up here of trying to be as sustainable and forward thinking from an eco-credential point of view as we can.
Absolutely. And one hell of a USP when you're trying to, I guess you use it for weddings and things, to sell it as an eco option,
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds like that would appeal to more and more people going forward. That's fantastic. So I'm assuming it's a wedding venue primarily, is it? Or
probably 70% of the business is through weddings. And then the rest is private events, corporates, some workshop kind of things as well. We try to, because we're relatively unique being an organic farm, we do get knocks on the door occasionally from organizations that want to come and do something corporate, but then also might want a farm tour or some lunch and maybe a talk about essentially what we're talking about now. Which we're always willing to do, because it's strange. Sometimes I get, sort of clouded by the privilege that we've got in farming the way we do. And I forget that actually it's still a very rare way of producing food. I sort of naively assume that people know about organics, what it is, but that's just not the case. So it's something that we do a bit of, but would like to do more of, really, to try and get the message out there.
Yeah, no, it's not the case. I don't think it is at all. But I think organics and the parameters around being organic seems to change over time. Do you find that, or is that just within certain? I do a lot of work with Arla Dairy, and I know when their organic requirements to be an organic farmer have changed over the years. Have those changed for you as well?
A little bit. So we are certified by the Soil Association, and they come and inspect, and we've got a close relationship with them. So it's almost it is a very good thing that the auditing process here. I can't speak for other nations, but I think it's pretty strict here, which is how it should be. So it makes sure that those that are, wearing their organic stamp are wearing it with pride because they're doing it the way that it should be done, and not just jumping through a few loopholes to perhaps gain a premium on the product that they're producing. It's an interesting one. I think because of the 70s and 80s, the sort of movement around organics was quite vociferous, and I think it alienated a lot of people from the whole concept. And I think it's been a lot of hard work over a 10, 20-year period of organizations like the Soil Association and various others that are springing up now to try and put organics back on the map, just in terms of being part of the conversation, and not being too aggressive with it. And that's been supported a bit by the regenerative farming movement as well, which is an interesting one. I'm not completely sold on it because I'm not too sure about the sort of regulations and auditing process around regenerative farming. Pretty much anyone that does something slightly more eco-friendly one year compared with the last could potentially call themselves a regenerative farmer. For me, yes. It's a process that one goes through rather than a stamp, is my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've made some films on regenerative farming, and there doesn't seem to be any clear boundaries as to what a regenerative farm is. Well, there are, but then someone else will have a very different set of boundaries, and it just seems to vary. I haven't seemed to quite work out what it is yet. It sounds to me that what you're doing on your farm is pretty regenerative in terms of it's a closed circle. And I think that would fit with some farmers' definition of regenerative, definitely.
It's an interesting one. The great thing about it is it seems to be a concept that people can understand just by its meaning. They can attach a sort of emotion to what regenerative farming means, whereas organic can be a little bit confusing for some people that aren't within the industry, perhaps. But as I see it, as a regenerative farmer, you're sort of going from A to B. And to me, the top would be organics. I mean, the only further you could go would potentially be, rewilding in terms of, really putting soils and environments back to as original condition as they could possibly be. It's a process of getting to where we and other organic farmers are. I see it as, but obviously I'm biased.
No, I agree. It would be good to try and get a clearer message out there, though, wouldn't it? About this is organic, this is what we do, this is our point, these are our points of difference, and where regenerative farming fits underneath that. I mean, I just think getting that message out and showing consumers what the benefit of buying organic is, not just in terms of flavor, but like what you've spoken about, and increased wildlife and a better way to manage the soil. It's a shame. I think has to be at government level, really, to try and
perhaps, or private sector with a lot of money somewhere that wants to put it towards that messaging and that communication.
Maybe the supermarkets.
It's funny, the way that organic produce is marketed in the supermarkets tends to be around flavor and health, and that's why there's a premium, but that's not actually necessarily the point, as I alluded to earlier. I think what the understanding needs to be is that when you're buying an organic product, you are supporting a part of the industry which further supports biodiversity, climate capture, and et cetera, which non-organics can do to a certain extent. I'm not saying they don't at all, but I just feel that organics does it more efficiently.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, I've taken up enough of your time, Joe. Thank you for being on here, but there is one final question that bit of a YouTube channel tradition. We always ask how our viewers on this channel can help you on your journey. So is there anything you want the viewers to do, any action you'd like them to take?
That's a lot to ask. That's very kind.
Well, that's the point of this, is to give you, who's doing something good,
okay.
in my eyes.
Come and have your birthday party up at Chalk Barn.
Birthday party. That's got to be like what, a 50th or something, or
whatever. Or maybe just come up for some drinks. How about that?
Okay, Chalk Barn.
Come and enjoy the view and buy more organic food.
How do they find Chalk? What do they put into Google to find Chalk Barn?
So it's if you put in chalk, it should come up on Google. But if not, it's www.atchalk.co.uk. Thanks,
Joe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so subscribe now and click the bell so you're notified when we speak to more pioneers of the agri-food industry that are leading the way to a sustainable, low carbon and regenerative future. Thanks for watching. Are you an agri-food pioneer? Get in touch now to arrange your interview.